My wife cheated with her high school ex because she thought I was clueless. I tracked her lies, exposed the affair, and watched them lose everything in a single day. Hey Reddit. So my wife thought she could cheat on me with her high school ex, hide it behind visits to her parents, and I'd just stay the clueless husband. What she didn't know was that I was 2 steps ahead. This is how I caught them both and walked away with everything that actually mattered. This all started way back in the early 2000s. My wife, let's just call her Lisa, and I had been married for about 8 years at the time. We had 2 kids, Jake, who was 6, and Emily, who was 4. Pretty normal life on the outside. I worked full-time in IT, and Lisa worked part-time at a small clothing store. Nothing seemed too unusual until I started noticing a pattern with where the kids were spending their time. Jake and Emily were little chatterboxes back then. They'd tell me about their day at dinner or while I tucked them in. Out of nowhere, I kept hearing the same thing. We went to Grandma and Grandpa's house again today. They were talking about Lisa's parents, who lived about an hour and a half away. At first, I didn't think much of it. Grandparents love having their grandkids around. But then it started sounding like a lot. 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes more. And this was happening on the days Lisa wasn't even scheduled to work. I brushed it off a few times, but it didn't sit right. Driving 3 hours round trip multiple times a week just so the kids could hang with grandparents didn't make sense. I started paying closer attention. One Thursday, I asked Lisa directly, "Why were the kids at your parents' again today? Don't you get tired of driving that far all the time?" She kind of laughed and said, "Oh, Mom and Dad love it, and it gives me a break." She said it quick, like she wanted to change the subject. Lisa was never a strong liar. I knew her well enough to pick up on the way she shifted in her chair or wouldn't meet my eyes. But I didn't press it. Instead, I decided to quietly keep track. That weekend, I went out to the driveway before she left for running errands and wrote down her car's mileage in a little notebook I kept in my desk. She was gone about 6 hours that day. When she got back, I went outside later and checked the mileage again. She had racked up a lot more miles than just going shopping. That became my system. Every time she left the house without the kids, I checked the odometer. After a couple of weeks, I had my answer. She was putting on about 400 extra miles a week. That wasn't Target runs or visiting a friend across town. That was long drives, regular ones. Meanwhile, the kids kept talking. Little things. Emily saying, "Grandpa made us grilled cheese again." Or Jake mentioning, "We played in their backyard today." The casual way they said it told me it was normal for them now. To them, it was just another day with grandparents. To me, it was proof Lisa was up to something else while they were there. I didn't get angry. I didn't yell or accuse. Maybe some guys would have lost it right then, but I'd grown up in a house where both my parents cheated on each other. I remembered the screaming fights, the slammed doors, the constant tension. It wrecked my childhood. I swore if I was ever in that position, I wouldn't repeat it. So instead of blowing up, I stayed calm. I acted like nothing was wrong. We ate dinner, we watched TV, we did the normal family routine. Inside, though, I was tracking everything. Dates, mileage, times, what the kids said. I was building a pattern. The weirdest part was how Lisa carried on like nothing had changed. She still kissed me goodnight, still folded laundry next to me on the couch. But once I saw those extra miles stacking up, I knew she had somewhere else to be. Somewhere she wasn't telling me about. One Friday night, while putting Jake to bed, he told me they were going back to Grandma and Grandpa's on Monday too. I asked, "Did Mom tell you that?" He shrugged and said, "She always does." That sealed it for me. There was no way she was driving 90 minutes one way, multiple times every single week, just for the kids to eat grilled cheese and play with Legos. By that point, I had a notebook full of entries, dates, and numbers. It wasn't the full picture yet, but it was enough to know my gut was right. Lisa was hiding something. I didn't know who it was or what the details were, but I was sure of one thing. I wasn't going to guess. And I wasn't going to confront her without being able to prove it. I had seen too many messy fights where nothing got resolved and the kids suffered for it. So I kept quiet, smiled at her, helped Jake with homework, watched Emily's cartoons with her. But in the back of my mind, I was already preparing. If Lisa wanted to run around like this, fine. But I wasn't about to let her drag me down with lies. That was the start of it. Just a dad with 2 young kids, a notebook, and a gut feeling that his wife wasn't where she said she was. And I was right. A few weeks after I started tracking the miles, I got the break I didn't expect. It was a random Tuesday night. I came home late from work, and Lisa had already gone to bed. I sat down at the family computer to check an email about a project I was working on. Right there, sitting next to the keyboard, was a yellow sticky note. Written on it was Lisa's AOL screen name and password. At first I thought, no way. But there it was, plain as day. She had scribbled it down like she was going to forget it. I stared at it for a minute, heart beating like crazy. I knew it was crossing a line, but after everything I'd been tracking, I couldn't walk past that note and pretend I hadn't seen it. So I logged in. The inbox was full of the usual junk, store newsletters, and emails from her parents. But then I saw a thread between her and her old college best friend. That's when my stomach dropped. They weren't talking about shopping or family gossip. They were talking about how Lisa was seeing her ex-boyfriend from high school. She didn't say his name in the emails, just him or T. But the way she described the meetups told me everything. She bragged about how easy it was to get away with it, how she'd drop the kids off at her parents and go, have some fun. One line burned into my head. We usually get lunch first, then head over to the motel. Same one every time. That was all I needed to read. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was in her own words. I clicked through a few more emails. Lisa joked about the guy's wife, calling her boring, and even making fun of how she'd let herself go after the kids. She wrote it like she was proud of sneaking around, proud of having this secret side life. I didn't read every single message, just a handful, enough to know what was happening. Then I did what anyone careful would do. I printed them out. Every message I opened got saved to paper. I didn't just keep them in the house either. The next morning, I slipped one set into a folder at my office. I wasn't going to risk her finding them and destroying the proof. After that, I logged out and left everything the way I found it. Sticky note stayed where it was. Computer went back to the desktop screen. I wanted her to keep using that account, keep writing things down. The longer she thought she was safe, the more she would reveal. Over the next couple of weeks, I checked in once in a while, always late at night when she was asleep. She wasn't writing pages and pages, but the emails she sent were enough to confirm the pattern. Lunch, motel, back to the kids. Rinse and repeat. On the surface, life in the house was normal. Dinner together, bedtime stories, weekend errands. But in my head, everything had shifted. I wasn't guessing anymore. I had her words printed in black and white. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Blowing up in the kitchen over an email would have been satisfying for about 5 minutes. But it wouldn't protect me or the kids in the long run. What I needed was airtight proof, not just her half-denials and excuses. One night, while scrolling her inbox again, I saw her write to her friend that she thought she was untouchable. She said I'd never suspect a thing. That was the moment I knew I had to take the next step. I couldn't just sit there printing emails forever. I needed someone who could give me hard evidence. Something that would stand if things went to court. That's when I remembered a buddy of mine from high school who had gone into law enforcement. We'd stayed in touch here and there. I shot him a call, told him what was going on without giving too many details. He listened and then said, "If you want real proof, hire a private investigator. I know a guy. He used to be on the force. He's legit." He gave me a number. I wrote it down and kept it tucked in my wallet. That night, I sat in the living room with the kids asleep upstairs and the TV playing quietly. Lisa was in the bedroom reading a magazine. I looked at the phone number and thought about what I was about to do. I wasn't scared. I was steady. I had lived through parents tearing each other apart with shouting and denial. I wasn't repeating that mess. I was going to walk into this with my eyes open and my hands full of proof. Now it was time for pictures, times, dates, the kind of report no one can argue with. The next morning, after dropping the kids at school, I called the number my buddy gave me. A guy named Mark answered. Straightforward, no nonsense. I told him about the mileage, the emails, and my suspicions. He wasn't surprised, said he'd seen it plenty of times. We met at a diner a few days later. I handed him copies of the emails and notes. He looked them over, explained his rates, and what he could do legally. Surveillance, photos, logs, the kind of evidence that actually holds up. I signed the retainer right there. He asked for details. Lisa's work schedule, her parents' address, the kids' school hours. The more he knew, the easier it would be to follow her without raising suspicion. The first week he started, I acted like everything was normal at home. Dinner at 6, bedtime routines, the usual. Inside, I was anxious to hear back, but I kept my mouth shut. Lisa had no clue anything was different. After a few days, Mark had her exact route. She drove from her parents in Cedar Ridge a few miles into downtown, met Tom, then down Highway 12 to the Sunset Motel, before looping back for the kids and driving the 86 miles home to Riverton. That's why the mileage kept climbing. Each trip was a long round loop, and doing it 2 or 3 times a week explained the extra 400 miles I'd been tracking. Over the next couple of weeks, Mark kept at it. He sent me copies of his logs, dates, exact times, and clear photos. Lisa was like clockwork. Drop the kids, meet the guy, disappear for a few hours, pick the kids up, and drive home acting like nothing happened. Eventually, Mark confirmed the guy's identity. He tracked the license plate back to him and pulled public records. His name was Tom, married, 3 kids, lived not far from us. He worked as a vice president of sales at his father-in-law's company. That explained the money and the flexible schedule. Mark even found out that the house Tom lived in wasn't really his. It was owned by his wife's parents. Hearing all of that made things click. Lisa wasn't just fooling around with some random guy. She was seeing someone who had a whole family of his own. Someone who thought he was safe because of his cushy setup. Mark didn't just stop at names. He dug a little deeper. He found out Tom's kids were in grade school, close in age to mine. His wife was a stay-at-home mom. To anyone on the outside, Tom looked like the perfect family man. Inside, he was sneaking off to motels in the middle of the day. The more I read through the reports, the calmer I felt. It might sound strange, but seeing it all laid out so clearly made me steady. There was no more doubt, no guessing. I had facts, dates, places, pictures. Lisa had no idea any of this was happening behind the scenes. She kept on with her routine, sometimes even humming when she came home like nothing in the world was off. I stayed polite, kept the house running, helped Jake with his math homework, and listened to Emily tell me about the cartoons she liked. Mark kept me updated once or twice a week. By the end of the month, I had a stack of evidence. Photos of Lisa's car outside the cafe, photos of her and Tom at the motel entrance, logs showing how long they stayed inside, when they left, and where they went after. It was airtight. I knew I couldn't sit on this forever. With my parents' history of affairs and how it ruined my childhood, I had sworn I wouldn't let my kids grow up in the middle of shouting matches and chaos. This wasn't just about catching Lisa, it was about protecting Jake and Emily from the mess. When Mark handed me the full report in a neat folder, I felt like I had finally reached the point where I could act. Inside the folder were everything I would need: proof of the affair, details about Tom, and a record that Lisa had been lying for months. We sat at that diner again, and he slid the folder across the table. "You're covered," he said. His tone was flat, but the weight of those words wasn't lost on me. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat, thinking about what came next. Lisa still had no clue. Tom's family had no clue. Everyone was living their day-to-day lives, and I was sitting there with evidence that could change all of it overnight. I didn't want chaos. I didn't want screaming fights in front of the kids. What I wanted was a clean break, a plan that would put everything on the table without dragging Jake and Emily through hell. That night, I tucked the folder into the back of my closet where Lisa never went. Then I sat on the couch, turned on the TV, and acted like it was any other night. But in my head, I knew the next step was coming. I had the proof. Now it was about using it. Once I had Mark's full report, mileage logs, emails, and photos of Lisa walking into a motel with Tom, I knew I couldn't sit on it. I wasn't about to waste it on a screaming match she could spin. I wanted it clean. The first thing I did was call a divorce lawyer. I set an appointment for the following week and made sure Lisa thought I was just working late. When I sat down in that office, the lawyer didn't look shocked at all. He said he dealt with cases like mine almost every month. I laid out the emails, the PI's report, the photos. He flipped through them, nodding the whole time. He explained that in our state, cheating didn't automatically mean I got everything in the divorce. But it did matter when it came to leverage. Judges didn't like liars or people sneaking around. If it came down to a fight over custody or assets, this proof made my position stronger. He said the smartest thing I had done was not confronting her yet. We went over the process step by step. He told me what paperwork I'd need to file, what the timeline usually looked like, and what the options for custody were. My only demand was that the kids' lives stayed as stable as possible. No shouting matches in front of them. No dragging them through the mess. After that meeting, I felt more focused than I had in weeks. I had a plan, but I also had an idea that went beyond just filing for divorce. I didn't want to be the only one who knew about Tom. His wife deserved to know the truth too. She was living with a man sneaking into motels in the middle of the day, same as me. She had 3 kids of her own. She deserved to have the same file I had. So I called Mark again. I told him I needed a few more copies of the report and asked him if he could track down Tom's wife's schedule. I wanted her to get the truth face to face, not in some anonymous envelope. Mark didn't ask many questions, just said he'd make it happen. Quick pause, fellas. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Thanks so much for your support. All right, back to the drama. From there, it was about timing. I sat with my lawyer again and asked what the cleanest way to serve Lisa would be. He suggested at her workplace. It might sound harsh, but it was the fastest way to make sure she couldn't avoid the papers. It also meant she couldn't spin a story to the kids before I had a chance to explain what was happening. I thought about it for a long time. Serving her at work would be embarrassing for her, but it was also controlled. No chance of a blow-up in the kitchen. No kids watching their mom and dad scream at each other. I decided that was the way to go. We lined everything up for a Tuesday morning while the kids were at school. The papers would reach Lisa, and Tom's wife would get the folder. Both secrets exposed on the same day. I spent that weekend making sure everything was lined up. Papers signed. Copies of the PI report ready. Kids' school schedule clear. I even arranged for my sister to pick up Jake and Emily that afternoon, just in case Lisa tried to do something dramatic after work. Through it all, I kept the same routine at home. Dinner, dishes, bedtime stories. Lisa had no clue. She still laughed at something on TV, still asked me to grab milk on the way home from work. The normal rhythm almost made it feel unreal. But every time I walked past the folder tucked in my closet, I remembered exactly what was coming. On Monday night, Lisa went to bed early. I sat in the living room with the lights low, looking over the timeline I'd written out on a piece of paper. Morning, kids to school. Mid-morning, serve Lisa. Same time, Mark meets Tom's wife. Afternoon, my sister picks up the kids. Evening, I go home and keep calm. It wasn't about revenge in the way people picture it. It wasn't yelling or smashing plates. It was about setting the record straight and cutting ties cleanly. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me while I played the clueless husband. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was nervous, I wasn't. It was more like being on edge before a big day at work, when you know you've got to handle everything without mistakes. When the sun came up on Tuesday, everything was ready. The kids were excited about show and tell at school. Lisa was rushing to get out the door like usual, and I was already dressed and out to the car before she even said goodbye. Lisa drove straight to her job after. I went to mine, but my head wasn't on work. My phone sat face up on my desk, silent. Everything was set to happen mid-morning. At 10:15, the process server walked into the clothing store where Lisa worked. She was behind the counter, chatting with two co-workers. He asked her name, handed her the envelope, and said she was being served. She froze. Her co-workers saw the whole thing. She opened the papers right there, eyes wide, face pale. She didn't argue, didn't cause a scene, just stood there holding the envelope like it weighed 100 pounds. At almost the same time across town, Mark was sliding into a booth at a small cafe. Sitting across from him was Tom's wife, a woman in her early 30s with tired eyes and a calm expression. He set the folder on the table. Inside were photos, logs, everything. Mark told me later that she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She flipped through the folder, page by page, then closed it neatly and tucked it into her bag. She thanked him, paid for her coffee, and left. That was it. She walked out with the truth and didn't look back. By noon, I got confirmation. Lisa had been served. Tom's wife had the folder. Both households knew. Two lies ripped open at the same time. I didn't go home right away. I stayed at work, head down, answering emails, acting like it was just another Tuesday. I didn't want to be there when Lisa first came back. I'd already arranged for my sister to pick up the kids, so the house would be calm when I arrived later. When I finally pulled into the driveway around 6, the lights were on inside. Lisa's car was there. My stomach tightened, but I stayed steady. I walked in through the garage like always. The kids weren't there. They were with my sister. Lisa was sitting at the kitchen table with the papers spread out in front of her. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying anymore. She looked up when I walked in, and for a second, neither of us said anything. The silence was heavy. "You had me followed," she finally said, her voice flat. "I had you checked on," I answered. And I was right. She didn't deny it, didn't try to explain. She just shook her head slowly, like she couldn't believe it had actually come to this. I didn't sit down. I didn't start an argument. I told her, "The kids are with my sister. We'll keep things normal for them. I don't want them dragged into this." She nodded, staring at the papers like they might change if she kept looking. I went upstairs, grabbed a bag with some clothes, and left her there. No fight, no shouting. Meanwhile, Tom's life started unraveling fast. His wife didn't waste time. Within a couple of days, she pulled their joint funds into an account under her name only. She took the kids to her parents and called her dad to lay out everything she'd learned. Her father, who owned the company where Tom held that cushy VP title, was furious. By the end of the week, Tom was out. No severance, no second chances. His father-in-law made it clear, family comes first, and Tom had betrayed his. To make matters worse, the house Tom lived in wasn't even his. It was owned by his wife's parents. Within a week or two, he was told to move out, and with no job and no savings, he had nowhere stable to land. That night, I sat on my sister's couch with Jake and Emily asleep in the guest room. She poured me a cup of coffee and asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, and I was. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't guessing or wondering. The truth was out. The next morning, I dropped the kids at school like always. Routine mattered to me. They didn't need to feel the weight of what had just happened. Lisa showed up at pickup that afternoon, quiet and pale. She didn't make a scene. She just buckled them in and drove off. After a week, the kids were at school, and I was running errands on my day off. As I came out of the grocery store, pushing a cart toward my car, I saw Lisa waiting by the parking lot. She was leaning against her car, arms crossed, eyes locked on me. I sighed, loaded the bags into my trunk, and shut it. "What do you want, Lisa?" She walked over, her voice sharp from the start. "You humiliated me. At work. Do you have any idea what that was like? In front of everyone?" I looked at her. "What did you expect me to do? Pretend I didn't know? Let you keep sneaking off like nothing was happening?" She shook her head, angry. "You didn't have to go this far. You didn't have to hire someone to follow me. That's insane. That's obsessive." I laughed once, humorless. "Obsessive? That's not obsessive. That's me figuring out what my wife was really doing while she lied to my face." She pointed a finger at me. "You could have just talked to me." "Talked?" I cut her off. "Lisa, you've been lying for months. Every time I asked, you had an excuse. You used our kids as cover. And you want me to believe that sitting you down for a talk would have fixed it?" She looked around the lot, as if the people walking by were listening. Her face was red. "You ruined my life. You made me look like a fool." I shook my head slowly. "No, Lisa. You did that. You're just mad that everyone else found out." That shut her up for a second, but then she came back harder. "You think you're so perfect? You think you're some kind of hero for this? You destroyed this family just as much as I did." I stepped closer, kept my voice even. The family ended the day you decided a motel with some old boyfriend mattered more than your husband and kids? Don't you dare put that on me." Her eyes watered, but there were no real tears. "You'll see. The kids will hate you for what you did to me. They'll see through this someday." I opened my car door and said, "The kids will remember who kept their world steady and who blew it up. That's all there is to it." She stood there trembling. For a second, I thought she was going to spit something worse out, but nothing came. She just turned, stomped back to her car, and slammed the door hard enough that half the lot looked over. I got in my car, drove off, and didn't look back. I didn't need to rub it in. I didn't need to celebrate. Watching the dominoes fall was enough. Lisa had her envelope. Tom's wife had her folder. And I had the kids safe, routine steady, life moving forward. I thought back to the night I found that sticky note with her password. All the nights I sat quietly printing emails. All the times I checked the odometer. It had all led to this day. One morning, 2 lives blown wide open. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I just set it in motion and let the truth do the work. That was the day everything changed. Lisa tried to keep her head down at her job, but it didn't work. She had been served at work in front of 2 co-workers, and word spread. Small towns don't keep secrets for long. By the end of the week, half the store knew. Some customers even whispered about it. She hated the embarrassment, but she brought it on herself. Tom didn't take his loss as well. From what I heard later, he went back to the house to argue with his wife. It got heated, and her brother stepped in. Things turned physical. Police were called, reports filed. Not long after, a judge issued a temporary restraining order to keep Tom away from her and the kids. A few weeks later, after the hearing, that order was made permanent. That wasn't the only incident. Over the next few months, there were a couple more police reports. Him showing up where he shouldn't, arguments spilling out in public, threats made in anger. One of those times landed him in jail overnight. His mugshot made the local paper. By then, his wife had filed for divorce. She wasn't dragging her feet. She had the PI's report, the police records, and her father's backing. Tom had no chance. He went from cushy VP with a big house to living in a rented room across town, broke and alone. I didn't keep tabs on him myself. I didn't have to. In a town like ours, stories find their way to you whether you ask or not. A neighbor would mention seeing him walking down the road. A co-worker of mine said they spotted him at a gas station looking rough. Eventually, I stopped hearing much at all. My own divorce moved forward smoothly compared to theirs. My lawyer and Lisa's lawyer handled most of it. We sat in the same room a few times, mostly silent except for signing papers. The judge didn't care much about the cheating itself. It wasn't that kind of state. But the proof helped keep things straightforward. Custody was the main issue. I wanted stability for Jake and Emily. The court ended up giving us joint custody, but I got the house so the kids didn't have to move schools or change routines. Lisa moved into an apartment not far away. I paid child support, but nothing outrageous. The kids adjusted faster than I expected. They didn't know the details, of course. They just knew mom and dad weren't together anymore. I made sure their days felt the same. School, sports, bedtime. No yelling, no chaos. That was what mattered most to me. Lisa and I kept our communication short and only about the kids. Pickups, drop-offs, school events. We were civil, but distant. I didn't ask her questions, and she didn't offer explanations. Whatever she felt, she kept it to herself. For me, the strangest part was how I felt. Watching Tom's world burn down didn't give me joy exactly, but it gave me a sense of closure. He had chosen to risk everything, and he lost. Lisa had chosen to sneak around, and she lost too. All I did was bring the truth into the light. I saw Tom once after everything. It was about 6 months later. I was at the grocery store with Emily, pushing a cart down the aisle, when I spotted him on the other end. He looked thinner, unshaven, wearing old clothes. He noticed me but turned away quickly and walked out. Emily didn't even notice. Lisa never mentioned him again. If she missed him, she didn't say it. She kept her head down, worked her shifts, and showed up for the kids on her scheduled days. That was all. By the end of that year, the divorce was finalized. Our state has a mandatory 90-day waiting period, plus some backlog in the court calendar, so it wrapped up that winter. Papers signed, custody set, support payments in place. It wasn't painless, but it was done. For Tom, the fallout never seemed to stop. Lost his job, his wife, his kids, his house, his reputation. For Lisa, she lost her marriage, her stability, and any chance at keeping her secret life hidden. For me, I kept what mattered. My kids had a steady home. I kept my dignity. I walked away knowing I'd handled it without shouting, without chaos. Just facts and actions. That was enough. Jake and Emily grew, moved through grade school, into middle school, and eventually high school. I made their lunches, drove them to practices, sat in the stands at games, clapped at school plays. Life wasn't easy, but it was steady. That was the one thing I wanted most for them. Stability. Lisa drifted further and further from the picture. She still had her custody time, but she never seemed comfortable anymore. She moved from one apartment to another, downsizing each time. Money was always tight for her. She never rebuilt her social circle either. Most people in town knew about what happened, and she never really shook the reputation. The kids noticed, not because I told them anything, but because they could see it. At my house, things stayed the same. Same school district, same bedrooms, same neighborhood friends. With Lisa, it was constant change. They were polite to her, but they leaned on me for their routines. Meanwhile, Tom completely disappeared from our lives. After the mess with his wife and the restraining orders, he left town. Nobody saw him at the grocery store anymore. Rumors said he moved to another state to try and start over. He left behind 3 kids who grew up without him around. His ex-wife went back to work at her father's company and over time, worked her way into running things herself. Last I heard, she was doing well. Every now and then, I'd hear someone mention Tom. Usually not in a good way. He was spotted working odd jobs, or he got in trouble again. None of it surprised me. His fall was complete, and there wasn't anything left of the life he thought he had. For Lisa, it was slower, but the misery stuck. She kept her job, but it was paycheck to paycheck. Her co-workers never forgot how she'd been served in front of them. She lost friends who didn't want to be caught in the middle. Even family gatherings at her parents' house were awkward. Her mom and dad were polite with me, but I knew they resented what she had done. As the kids grew older, they started to understand more. I never poisoned them against their mother. I kept it simple. Your mom and I had problems, so we separated. But kids aren't blind. They picked up on the difference in how I carried myself versus how Lisa seemed stuck in the same spot. By the time Jake graduated high school, he chose to live with me full-time. Emily followed a year later when she finished. They both loved their mom, but they preferred the stability at my house. That said enough, Lisa and I barely spoke once the kids became adults. Our texts dropped to nothing. No calls, no updates. She was just someone I used to know, tied to me only by the fact we shared 2 kids. I didn't hate her. I didn't wish her pain. I just stopped caring altogether. She was background noise in a life I had rebuilt. Sometimes I think about how different things could have been if I had lost control back then. If I had screamed at her in the kitchen the first time I suspected something. It would have spiraled. The kids would have been in the middle, and maybe I would have lost custody. Instead, I stayed patient, let the truth speak for itself, and came out stronger. Karma handled the rest. Tom lost his family, his job, his home, his reputation. Lisa lost her marriage, her stability, and her good name in town. Neither of them walked away with what they thought they'd gain. I walked away with peace. My kids are grown now, doing well, and I still have a relationship with both of them. They saw me steady through the hardest part of my life, and I know it shaped them for the better. That's what I call a win. Not revenge in the loud, dramatic sense. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I handled it right. The truth burned them down. All I had to do was light the match.